Hello friends, and welcome to Escaping the Mouse with your host, me, Breck Roll. Alright, so I got up this morning. I wasn't really sure what I was going to vlog. I've kind of burned myself out on all the reports on what's going on in California. So, and I didn't really feel like going out and doing a field trip kind of thing. So you know what that means. That was sort of the reason I came up with the mouse food segment. Is because, you know, if I don't know what to do on a given day, we'll just pull a recipe out and do that. So that's what we're going to do today. We are going to do another episode of Mouse Food. Today, well, actually, when I started this thing, I got a whole bunch of recipes right off the bat, including like 3 different variations of meatloaf. So I decided I was going to do one of those today. Now, one of those variations of meatloaf was called Grandma's Spicy Meatloaf. And you know, if you add the word spicy in it, that's going to get my attention. So this one is from Celia Lovett. This is her, I guess, her grandmother's spicy meatloaf. So let's try this. This sounds good. So one of the things I liked about about this recipe is that it's actually relatively inexpensive to make. This is all you really need. You need 2 eggs, a pound of ground beef, a pound of breakfast sausage, spicy, 1 sleeve of saltines, a bell pepper, an onion, and a can of tomato soup. So, you know, this was a very economical meal. You're going to get 8 servings out of this, and it costs a little under $13. So, you know, that's $1.50 a serving. You can't beat that. Now, one of the setbacks I ran into was that I actually the recipe called for a broiler pan. I don't have a broiler pan, and I don't anticipate needing one that often, so I didn't really want to go out and get one. But it seemed to me that based on what I was reading in the instructions, the broiler pan was just there to ensure that the grease drips away from the meat during the baking process. And I think I can improvise using a cooking grate, a cookie sheet, and a little aluminum foil. And I think that's going to work just fine. So the first step in the recipe is actually to preheat the oven to 350 degrees. Now, since it's going to take me a little longer to do this because I'm filming it, I'm going to actually hold off on preheating the oven until I'm a little closer to being ready. But if you're doing this for real, you know, yourself, you know, preheat the oven at this point to 350 degrees. The first step then is that we need to prepare the bell peppers and the onions. And so they say chop them or use a food processor. I got the food processor out, so I'm going to do that. They also say that before you deal with the bell peppers, that they recommend you take the seeds out of it. So I'm going to chop the bell pepper up into a couple little pieces so that I can remove the seeds. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just slice the bell pepper in half. This just allows me to get into the middle of it. Then we'll slice it into quarters. I know some of you mentioned on my last recipe that I need to get some real kitchen knives. I actually have real kitchen knives, but unfortunately they're in the storage lockers, so I'm just having to make do with the steak knives. So that's what the deal is there. Kind of separating the seeds. Then we'll throw those into the food processor and we'll be ready to go. So I've already also skinned my onions, so I'm just going to chop that into little pieces. This is a big part of the reason I use the food processor, because chopping up onions isn't a whole lot of fun. So I got the food processor set up with the slicer tool. And so I'm just going to kind of feed in the onions and the bell peppers here, and we'll just kind of do this a little bit at a time here. So next the recipe calls for crushing 1 whole sleeve of the saltine crackers. Now they recommend taking 5 to 8 of them out of there. Apparently that's a little bit too much for the recipe. So I'm going to follow this to the letter on this first time, and then we'll start fiddling around with it next time if I try this again. So I'm going to pull about 5 to 8 of them out. And that's 6, so we'll start with that. And then crush, crush, crush. A lot of this is done with your hands, so just be prepared for that. Okay, I'm having to improvise a little bit because I don't have a large mixing bowl, so I'm using my large pot here to do that. But basically, we're going to mix everything in here together. So I got my onions. I'm going to put 1 of the eggs in here. My sausage. My ground chuck. The crackers, and the tomato soup. I've already prepared for this by washing my hands because obviously I'm going to be handling the food directly now, but we're just going to get in there and mix it all together by hand. I think I made the right call not doing this in the mixing bowl I did have, because there's no way that would have been enough to hold all of this. Kind of breaking up some of the chunks of onion that didn't get fully ground up here. Sometimes that happens with a food processor. Tends to slice it rather than chop it. So at this point I'm going to preheat my oven, set it for 350 degrees. That'll take about 10 minutes to get going. Then next thing I'm going to do is, this is what I'm doing to improvise for not having a broiler pan. I just got a little cooking grate here. I wrapped it with aluminum foil. I'm going to poke some holes in it just so that the grease can drip through to the underside. And I'm going to coat the thing with cooking spray. I actually suggest doing grease, but I don't have grease. I'm going to use Pam. That works really well. Then what you want to do is you're just going to you're going to grab globs of the mess here. The instructions actually say make it about the size of a tribble, but if you don't know what a tribble is, then you know, it's about that. Probably about the mass of a baseball. They say leave it in kind of a oval shaped. And I'm hoping I'm going to be able to get it all on here. Might have to do this in two batches here, which I guess wouldn't be the end of the world. And I think I'm going to do that just because I don't have really all the space that I need to do it. So we'll do 4 this time and 4 next time. I think that one's probably a little too big, so we're going to take some out of there. Maybe take a little off of that one. You know, tribble is such a subjective size, right? Now, if you recall, the recipe called for 2 eggs, but we only put one in the into the meat mix. The other one's going to be used for a just something to coat the meat with. They call it an egg wash. So I'm just going to beat the egg. Until it's all kind of mixed together. Now the instructions actually call for using your hand to coat the eggs, but I've got a nice little basting brush, so I'm going to use that. It's just a tad bit more sanitary. And just as I finished applying the egg wash, the oven hit the preheat level. So we're just going to throw this into the oven. And I actually forgot one thing. They recommend putting a 1/4 cup of water in the bottom of the pan just to kind of absorb the grease. I also suspect it probably boils a little bit in the oven also, and that probably adds to the moisture in there. And then we're going to bake for 50 to 60 minutes at 350 degrees. I'm going to start with 50 minutes and just see how that looks. And then we may go a little longer if we need be. So since it's going to be a little while before we do the second batch here, I'm just going to put all this in the fridge just to kind of keep it cold so that we don't have any contamination issues. Alright, we're 50 minutes later and the first batch has come out. These look pretty good, they smell pretty good, so we'll have to give them a try here. Like I said, I want to get a second batch in because then we can get them all ready to go here. Alright, so now it begins with the all-important taste test. Now usually I always have ketchup with meatloaf, but I want to try it just by itself just so I see what the base flavor is. It's good. It's good, yeah. I'd do this again. I can recommend this one. Now they call it spicy. I guess I prefer a little bit more spice in it. I can taste a little bit of the flavor, but I would probably, if I were going to do this again, I might mix a little Tabasco sauce, maybe even chop up some jalapenos in there to give it a little bit more bite. But yeah, it's good. So yeah. Thumbs up. Now, a lot of you may say that, oh, you're just going to like everything because you don't want to offend the people who send in your send in recipes to you. But you know, the reality is, you know, I kind of know what I'm getting into because I look at the ingredients and kind of know what to expect from it. So, in reality, you know, if it's something I don't think I'm going to be into, you know, I probably won't make it in the first place. Because, like I said, I don't want to offend anyone, but you know, if it's good, you know, that's real. I'm not going to fake it. I'm not going to say it was good when I didn't like it. So anyway, that's all I have for today. I'll make sure to post this recipe down in the description below so you can try it if you like. And please remember to send in your own recipes. The address is escapingthemouse@gmail.com. And I'll put that address here also. So that is all that I have for today. Thank you as always for watching, and I will see you next time on Escaping the Mouse. Bon appetit!